Hello, hello. Oh, crikey, yeah, that is loud. Yeah, thanks for all coming along. Yeah, we're going to talk about building custom Slack apps, how you can do it now, and then how you can kind of do it in the future. It's going to be fairly fast, so apologies if I talk too quickly, but we'll get straight into it. You might know me or not. I'm Todd Halfpenny. I'm mobile technical architect at a company called Cadify. We have a no-code app builder for building mobile apps for Salesforce customers. I'm one of the London Developer Group organizers as well. I can see Keir is in the group, another co-organizer, and Anoop, who we managed to get rid of some years ago. I'm also one of the London schooling organizers, you might have seen, but I've changed my T-shirt, and that's because I'm also the founder of something called Shirtforce, where we design T-shirts that are hopefully quite funny, and all the profits go to charity. And yeah, that's me. We're going to talk about building custom Slack apps. We'll talk about what apps are in general in Slack, why you might use them, when you should use them, and when you shouldn't do, really. We will talk a bit about what Slack offers us as developers and how we can build with it. We'll talk about the kind of architecture that we can use today to build Slack apps and why we might kind of do that. And then hopefully we're going to show some code. There won't be any live coding, but there will be some code up there demoing what we can kind of do and show you a bit of an app. We'll also be talking about the future, which is fresh, still in closed pilot, possibly open pilot. We'll get to that anyway. But what are Slack apps exactly? Well, I don't know how many people have used apps like Polly for doing quick polls and surveys in apps. So apps can be sending messages into Slack. They can also be listening to messages and things like that, adding functionality in. There's an example here by Asana. Is it Asana? Yeah, this one. So they're doing link unfurling. If someone puts a link in, it'll unfurl it and give you some options that enable you action on those things into channels. Salesforce have recently announced more Slack apps. There's one for marketing, sales, and service, announced at Trailblazer DX. And here you can see kind of they're right in on the game. As well as apps being able to push messages into channels, so for notifying people about things or for link unfurling like that, apps can also have their own app homes, like this Task Titan app here. It's got its own app home where a particular user can go to, and they get content that's directly associated for them, and they can action on those types of things in here. Why and when should you be building Slack apps or thinking about building Slack apps? Well, we should be doing it right now because it's Salesforce, and I think they'd be cheesed off after $27.7 billion, and no one started building with it. But yeah, it's Salesforce, and there's a lot of drive from Salesforce internally now on Slack. And you might have heard the term digital HQ, and that's kind of where your users are now. They want to be bringing actions and flows that you could be doing or could be doing in Salesforce into where your users are. And I know that personally I spend a lot of my time inside Slack working on a day-to-day basis. Salesforce have come up with this term thin work. I don't know if it existed before this. I don't really know, but they might have done. But it's the idea of thin work is pieces of work you could be doing that are quite small, possibly contextual, maybe related to a conversation, nothing that's really going to involve a complicated, massive UI and loads of data that's too hard. And one of the ways Salesforce described it to me when I was talking to them is that if you can't envisage doing this action, this flow, using this app on your phone, then it's probably not right for doing in Slack, full stop. And Slack development. So what have we got to work with from Slack? Because obviously they existed long before acquisition. Well, they have certain UI elements. There's this kind of message that you can see here, and it's got a header, and there's a divider line. There's some text with links and emojis, input boxes, and actions. There are listeners available for you to act on certain kind of events. So here's a couple of shortcut menus, one from a message and one from like a context menu within a message that came through. And then there's a whole set of APIs that are given to us. I think there's upwards of 250 different web APIs that will allow you to do certain things like post a message into chat, right? Listen to a particular channel, add users to a channel, invite yourself to a channel. All sorts of things are available. But how do we access these parts of Slack development? Well, in terms of the UI, Slack has given this thing called BlockKit. And here you can see on the left-hand side, oh, I can see the screen, it is left. On the left-hand side is the kind of message that we put up a minute ago with the header and the line. And all of the UI is defined in JSON in Slack. So here we can see a bit of JSON that's defining the block. You've got a bit of text that says, this is a header block, and it's allowed to have emojis in there. And this BlockKit is I guess it's a way that Slack are enabling people to build apps that maintain a consistent UI across everything. There isn't really a way to add markup and CSS and things like that and jazz it all up, although I have been playing with custom emojis to create frames and things, but it's all a bit narky. So yeah, it's to give a consistent UI, and that's BlockKit. And Slack has got this BlockKit builder online where you can drag and drop your UI in, and it will spit you out the JSON that will look like what you're after. And in terms of the APIs, accessing the APIs, it's fairly straightforward, I guess. There's client.views.open, something you can call, and that will open a view within Slack that asks Slack to open a view for you. And here's one where I'm doing app.shortcut, which is listening for a shortcut. So these are the examples of what the APIs kind of look like. In our use case that we're going to run through quickly today, I said I work for a company we're building mobile apps, and our customers have mobile apps, and the marketers want to have some way of quickly seeing how their apps are doing on iTunes and Google Play, for example. They want to know how many people have installed them, what reviews they've got, and what the current rating is, for example. And with that in mind, this is the architecture we're going to go ahead with quickly to build an app that satisfies that use case. This is how we build it today, and on the left-hand side, you've got Slack. So to create an app on Slack, you have to go onto the website and say, I want to create an app, basically. You then get a set of config that you can modify. And on the right-hand side, we've got our backend, which is where our Salesforce data lives. And then what we're going to be doing is we're going to be building up a piece of middleware that will allow us to do user-to-user authentication for our app when it's calling to Salesforce and back. And it's also going to have a whole amount of logic in there. One thing I didn't have to do when I'm building this, though, is start from scratch, because Salesforce have thankfully come up with this Salesforce Slack starter kit. That's an alliteration that I've fallen over too many times. And it's an open source GitHub repo built by Salesforce that gives you a whole load of a big skeleton project that will get you going quite quick. In that project folder, you have this Heroku app. So this is a Node.js app. This is where all our logic's going to live, in that middleware. That's in there as kind of starter. It tells us, like, where would we put our views in this project? Where would we put our listeners? And gives examples of those sorts of things. This starter app also comes with like an SFDX Salesforce source. This contains things like a connected app that allows us to talk in and out, and all kinds of definitions there, and some objects that allow us to do user-to-user authentication between your Slack user and your Salesforce user, which is pretty cool. There's a README which controls, obviously, we love READMEs, right? Who doesn't love README? As long as it says basically nothing. And then what you can also do is when you're building out here, you can quickly run this starter kit, and it will also create you a scratch org, and the scratch org definition is in here as well. So if you're building, you can be building against a nice scratch, easy peasy, not mucking about with prod or anything like that. But the juice of this stuff, this starter kit, is in this deploy script. And what this deploy script will do when you run it is it will create you a scratch org, first of all, like I said. It will create some objects for this authentication piece and provide a connected app and all kinds of, what's it called, like skeleton project for skeleton code and things like this. It also creates you a Heroku app. So you link it to your Heroku account. It creates a Heroku app for you and pushes up this kind of initial set of dummy data into it. And then it creates a whole lot of keys for authentication. So you can choose how you do the authentication, but out the box, it will create this kind of JWT kind of flow, and then throw the keys into Heroku and into Slack and into Salesforce, and you basically don't have to do anything. And once you run that, pretty much what you get after a couple of minutes is something that looks like this. So I've got an app here, and if I just type the command who am I, which is in the starter kit code, we don't have to worry about coding this. This was already in there. I click this. This is then going to go off to the middleware. That middleware is going to say, oh, yeah, right, I need to talk to the Salesforce to find out who I am and come back with the instance URL. And then the middleware sends back to the Slack and says, oh, right, can you open a modal for me that's got this header and this text in it, which is cool. And that happens kind of all out the box. We've got this framework for us to start building an app on. But what do we want to be building? We want to be building something that looks a bit more like this. So I've got App Store listings for Apple and iOS. I've got some rankings, and then I've got some recent reviews in there with some actions against them that maybe the marketer wants to do. And how are we going to be building this? Well, first things first, if we've got this app home screen, we need our Heroku app, our Node.js app, to be listening for that app home being opened. And handily, there's a nice event, which is app.event, app home opened. Woo. And we pass in a callback, which then is where our logic will take place. Part of that callback, of course, is if we're going to be wanting to bring down that data. So the data we saw, which was the iOS reviews, iOS and Android ratings and the reviews, they're all stored in my Salesforce org as custom objects. But I need to get them. So part of the callback that says when my app home opens is I want to go and get the fresh set of data from Salesforce. And the Salesforce Slack starter kit uses JSForce. I don't know, has anyone used JSForce before? Yeah, a few hands have gone up. That's for like a JavaScript library that's used, gives you a nice wrapper around having conversations with Salesforce from JavaScript. And so part of our callback looks like this. We'd say, right, I need to get my, what am I getting? Getting my listing summaries. So yeah, I'm just going to do that and bring back an object that has those in there. Once we've got those results back, what we need to be doing is creating the block kit JSON. That's the bit that creates the UI in Slack. And how we do this is using the Bolt SDK, which is the set of web APIs that Slack gives us. And in there, we can import a load of things that are going to help us out. I've got a home tab, which is our home tab. We've got blocks, which are things like our UI elements, and then the elements are a subset of elements. There's MD, which is the markdown, so we can do things like bolding and superscript and all that kind of jazz. And then our callback, what I'm saying is I need to take in my listings summaries that I've got here. I'm passing that in to this function, and I want to then kind of build some JSON up. And the block kit lets me do things like, here I'm going to say, in my home tab, have me some blocks, and in those blocks I want to have a header, and that header is going to have like a property called text, and that's going to say App Store listing summaries. So that's how we're building up our JSON. We're not like handcrafting the JSON. We're using block kit, the Bolt SDK to take care of that for us. It allows us easy access to these properties. What we then want to do, if we're talking about the two listing summaries, is like kind of create two sets of records to give us these two columns where our listings are. And this is kind of how we're doing that. I've taken the listing summaries result, which is what we got back from Salesforce, and the records, there's a records property in there which contains our records, and then I'm creating a map of those and outputting basically text using this nice bold, whatchamacallit thing in here that's come through. Once I have the text, I'm then going to throw this into another block for the JSON. I don't have to worry about crafting the JSON, like I said. At the end of my function, where I've used all this, I guess, I don't know what we call them, like assistant commands to build up our JSON. I can just say, home tab, build to JSON. Right? Oh, that's good. That's going to take care of all the JSON for me, which is nice. And when we've run that, I get this, which is cool. So we can see up on the sides, we've got our iOS and our Android listings. We've got the bold text for like the total downloads and the name of the things. But let's see what we can be doing let's see it in action here. So I've opened my app, but as well as this, I can create, let's say the marketer says, oh, look here, this person wants to run this thing on their Raspberry Pi, which we all want to do because we're devs and we love that kind of stuff. They click on the button. This is then sent off to my middleware, an action that says they want to create a case. The middleware coder says, oh, right, that was related to this review. Can you create a modal for me, building up some JSON, and make the modal look like this with these input boxes? So we've now got, like, someone can add a subject to their case, and they could alter the description if they wanted, but we've pre-filled that in this instance. When the person then clicks submit, that is going back to my middleware again. My middleware saying, oh, brilliant, you want to now do this. It then uses JSForce twice to say, right, can you create me a new case, please? And when that case is created, it's then going to update the review in there. And if we click the review button, you can see there's the review. We said, I've got an issue installing it on my Pi. I want to be able to do that. And there's an associated case for it too. I think Yeah, he's going to zoom in, because why not? I mean, the screens are big enough, aren't they? Jeez, it's mental here. All right, so yeah, you can see how this is beginning to tie together. And what we've done is we've just used our JavaScript code in the middleware and a bit of JSForce to interact with Salesforce, and we've got a working Slack app now, which is pretty cool. Wait, I don't know. Is that clock counting down or up? 17. It's counting down. OK, now I know. Right, local development. This is a good thing. Because we're building a Node app, we can run it locally on our local machines. And our Heroku app, yeah, is a Node app. I can use something called ngrok. I think it's pronounced ngrok. And it allows us to create a public URL that we can route to a port running on our local machine, which is quite funny. And if I configure Slack and configure Salesforce, say, hey, this Heroku app that you were talking to now lives on this ngrok URL, then I can actually run my app locally and debug it all in VS Code, which makes, obviously, dev time much lower. So here I've got my ngrok is running. Right? Don't worry too much about it. I've run this thing, and it's saying, right, my local host 3000 is now on this public URL, and I've told Slack and Salesforce to do that. And I've got a piece of my code in here. I hope that's big enough. Apologies if it's not. And within VS Code, I'm going to say, right, I want to run this and debug it. I can then add some breakpoints into my code. And if I run my Node app from within here, the debugger is going to attach to my VS Code, which is all hunky-dory. I've got a couple of red dots. I don't know if you can see those lines, 25 and 26. My breakpoints, and I've got some console log lines too, because who hasn't got console log lines everywhere in their JavaScript? And now if I run this, and I open my app home, we should be able to see some output in the console here. This is from the starter kit saying, oh, right, I'm now going to ask server about authenticating you. Is this all good? And then if I click on the home tab, it's then going to go through, call Salesforce. So Slack's going to this ngrok, to my local machine, back out to Salesforce and coming back. And then I'm debugging here. And by hovering over, we can use VS Code debugging, like I hope you're aware of. And I can see the results that have come back from Salesforce in their raw form. And I've also got all my console log output as well, which is going to help me debugging greatly. But that's all the past, right? I mean, we all know that pilots and betas from Salesforce need to be taken with a grain of salt or two. But I feel that the push from Salesforce to Slack is so large. And they've got this current thing that's in closed beta called Foyer, or was called Foyer, I should say. And basically what they're doing is they are removing the need for all the middleware stuff. They don't need you to have a Heroku account. They don't need any of that jazz. You don't need connected apps. What they've now got is an SDK that you use, build natively on platform, defining Slack apps on the platform, writing code and these views, and that's how it's going to work. So this is, no need for middleware. It's going to provide user-to-user authentication out the box, which is definitely a plus, so all your CRUD, FLS, et cetera, is going to be just dandy. Currently in closed pilot for partners. It should be opening into public pilot this month. We're in June. Yes, June 10th. How could I forget? And it should be going beta in winter, fingers crossed, right? Great thing about this, it's going to be packageable from the get-go, so 1GB and 2GB packageable from the get-go. The idea being is you can build an app and a Slack app and distribute it on the App Exchange and all be good. I did hear it's not going to impact API calls, but who knows? Right? We keep our fingers crossed for that. And to give you an example of what building with the new Apex SDK on Salesforce looks like, this is the same app as I built before, but using the pilot code. We've now got a new Slack classes available to us, and here I'm essentially listening for an app home opened. Somewhere else in my project, there's a new type of app, which is a Slack app, and in there I've defined the listeners and which classes and things should be called. So I've said, in the app home opened, you should be running this. The similarities are very strong, though. So in here again, I'm now saying, right, I want to get a view that needs to be displayed to the user as part of this. And then I'm going to publish the view back to Slack. Under the hood, it's creating the JSON as it was before. And we don't have to get bogged down in the middleware and any of that carry on. This is a very simple example, of course, because I'm getting a couple of records from a couple of custom objects, no big deal. And part of my app home being opened and this class being called, I'm saying, right, I'm going to share a view with Slack. And part of that sharing of the view, I'm going to be saying, you need to be using data from this data provider to enrich it. And this is what this data provider class looks like. This is kind of how they're defining that you build them. It's very simple. I'm going to get some reviews, and then I'm going to return them, which is good. The interesting thing with this, I mean, I was quite excited when I started building Slack apps, and I thought, well, JSON's nice. I like JSON. I mean, I don't know if everyone does, but I do. Maybe I'm a bit perverse. What I don't like is YAML. And now there's a load of YAML, which is just, I think, horrendous. But it's the way they're doing it for the moment. And so within a Slack project, to define your view, you're not using JSON to define a view. You're building these YAML files, sadly. But part of the view, I'm saying, when you build my app home screen, this is for this view definition, I need you to be pulling in this thing called review from this review data provider that we just saw. And then the rest of it's fairly similar to the JSON. I'm saying, well, actually, I've got a header, right? And in that header, there's a thing called text, and I want the text to be recent reviews. You can put Markdown in here. You can put links and all that kind of stuff. What you couldn't do in the JSON world was, like, you didn't have the binding of UI and data together, but you have that in this view definition. So now we're saying, actually, I'm going to iterate on something, which was this review thing that we defined from the data provider. And for each of those reviews, I'm now going to have some components. And one of those components could be text item, which is pretty cool. This is a Salesforce formula function in here, which is, I mean, who would want to do that? It's quite narky, but it works. We're just saying if something is the text string iOS, then use like the Apple emoji, if not use a robot face emoji to give us some kind of things. But you could put putting images in there, I guess. And so we're going to be going through this iteration in the view. And then the app looks exactly the same as it did before. I have probably 10 times less code in the Foyer way of doing things as opposed to building it in Node.js. But I did have to deal with YAML, right? But you know, and I can package it, which is good. So to wrap up, you should start building today, or at least you should start thinking about what you can build today, because you're going to be able to package these Slack apps for your customers, or be building them for your end users, or whatever. And now's the time to start thinking about the use cases. Where can you start taking advantage of these two powerful platforms? There's a massive focus from Salesforce, obviously, after spending nearly $30 billion, you'd be thinking there would be. But you see with the release of the new apps they've got and the integration with Flow, this is something that they want us to be doing. There is a great set of tools available, whether you're building now with Node to get it off the ground, or whether you're going ahead and start on the pilots, for example. They're all pretty neat. Things are going to get a lot easier, like I said, with the Apex SDK, and I'm hoping someone's going to build a nice YAML generator, because don't want to touch it. Yeah, start thinking about your use cases I mentioned. I've got a whole load of resources here. I'll be posting the slides up, so don't worry about taking notes of them. But Kevin Poorman did a brilliant Code Live video series where he built the Slack starter app with Mohit from the DevRel team. There's a link to the starter app as well. Alba Rivas has got a brilliant blog series which has YouTube videos and Git repo, all there for you to see how she built it. And that's like a travel expense type app. There's a partner group, I should say. Oh, and if you're a partner, who's a partner in here? Is there partners? If you're partners and you want to get involved, Salesforce are now offering vouchers to get Slack certified. So you can become an admin, Slack admin, and you can become a Slack dev certified. I took mine with them. It wasn't as hard as I thought it would be. I need to brush up on my Slack security. I'll let you into a secret there. I was very close to not getting it. And the Slack dev docs obviously are brilliant. But apart from that, I'd like to say thank you very much for listening to me today. Yeah. And I'm very happy to take some questions. We've got a couple of minutes. Yes?
You mentioned about user federation between Slack and Salesforce.
Yes.
So is there a way of doing, like if you're using Slack and you're not a Salesforce user, you take any of the data? Like
so the question was about user-to-user authentication, and could you not need to have a Salesforce user on the platform? Yeah, you could. So if you have an integration user, for example, your Heroku app could be running as an integration user, and so your Slack users would chat to Heroku, obviously authenticating in some manner, and then you could use an integration user to make calls. Obviously, you have to be aware that your data you're getting back is, yeah, exactly. Oh, I don't think it will unless people start sharing Slack logins, which maybe, I mean, we shouldn't be doing anything like that, but I don't think there's like a way to interact as an integration user, unless you just have the one user account, no. Yeah, no, I don't know, sorry about that. Yes. Any more questions? I can't see. No? Lovely. Well, in that case, thank you very much again. Yeah, start thinking about Slack apps, and we'll see what you come up with. Cheers. Thank you.